Greetings, Star Citizens, and welcome to another beautiful day in the verse. Now, with the recent sale and discount sale of the Super Hornet, I figured a lot of people would have one now, or want to get one. So I thought I would look at some of my favourite loadouts. So this first loadout is sort of the fixed energy weapon. So I've got the Panther repeaters on the wings and the nose, and then I've got the Omnis guys on the turret. Now you might be thinking the turret is a turret, so how is this a fixed loadout? And we get around that by obviously locking the gimbal so that turret becomes like a fixed weapon. And this option is pretty decent, however the gimbal versions of all of these loadouts, in my opinion, work a lot better for this ship. Now normally I am a fixed weapon person, if you would. And normally I always go with fixed weapons, so with my saber I've got fixed weapons, and even my Starfarer I somewhat fly like fixed weapons a lot of the time. For the Starfarer it's for different reasons. It's because the gimbals on that sometimes don't like the latency of the game. Fixed seems to be a little bit more reliable. But yeah, normally I always go with fixed, but in the Hornet's case, I would say gimbals are better. But I wanted to cover all my sort of top loadouts. Now these are obviously just my opinion. None of them are sort of set in stone. None of them are actually, literally better than any other. They are all down to preference, all down to opinion. I like the Panther repeaters, which is why I went with the Panther repeaters. And for the Top Gun, you could also get the flashfire mount, which lets you have a size 4, and you could have, is it the M7A? I can't remember, M7A or M5A, but the size 4 laser cannon. I don't have one of those, which is why I'm not going with that. If I did, then I would definitely go with that, because they match up fairly close to the pips of the Panther repeaters. And as you guys probably know by now, I like my pips to line up. But yeah, I think this option works pretty well in a dogfighting situation. It is a little bit better for bigger ships, bigger fighters, vanguards, constellations, starfarers, etc. It works a lot better on those. And that's the same with the fixed ballistic loadout that I go with when we get to that loadout. But yeah, it's fairly decent because of the fire rate. It's still usable against fighters, and it's still usable in a dogfighting situation, but not ideal. So the next option in the line would be the fixed sniper, as I like to call it. So this, like the last loadout, uses fixed weapons, and again with the turret it's not fixed, but you can fix it. So we've got tarantulas on the wings and the nose, and then we've got tarantulas on the turret. So obviously we've got size 3 tarantulas on the ship, and then size 2 on the turret. And as I was saying with the energy one, you could put a flash mire, and you could go with the, is it the FL-33 explosive cannon, blah blah blah. You could go with that. I'm going to go with it for this gameplay footage, just because it is quite satisfying when it works in your favor. The only thing about it is it doesn't always work in your favor against small fighters. So this loadout for me, I would take if I know I'm going to be fighting big ships, if I know I'm going to be against starfarers, if I know I'm going to be against a constellation, possibly even capital ships, though you're probably not going to do much to capital ships. But if you know you're going to be fighting a big ship, this is a perfect loadout, because it is a lot of damage focused in a very small area. Well, it's a big area on a small ship, but like I say, if you're fighting big ships like a Starfarer, it is very focused damage. And I think we just clipped our wing, but we'll ignore that. We'll pretend it didn't happen. So yeah, in a fighting situation, dogfighting situation like we're in now, it isn't really that good, but it is still very satisfying. When you do land the shots, you will kill stuff. Things will die almost instantly. Sometimes in one shot, sometimes in two, sometimes in three. but they will die extremely quickly. And I'm being very conservative with the fire rate here. I could hold it down and it does fire fairly quick. It's not as fast as the Panther repeaters obviously, but it is still pretty quick fire rate. I'm just being very conservative, and that's the best way to use this particular loadout. You want to be conservative with your ammo, especially when you're fighting smaller ships. Obviously if we was fighting a Starfarer or a Constellation, we could probably just hold down the trigger and we would put out a lot of damage on that ship. But yeah, against fighters it's just not really reliable. I don't think fixed weapons on a Hornet are very sensible anyway in a dogfighting situation, just because of how sluggish the Hornet is, or the Super Hornet and the Hornet. The very sluggish ships, the very slow ships, and mobility, agility are not two things that the Hornet really boasts, so being able to gimbal your weapons is a massive benefit to these sort of ships. So the next two loadouts that we will look at are going to be gimbaled. So the first one being the gimbaled energy option that I would go out. So this is for the ballistophobes out there that don't like ballistics. I personally prefer ballistics, so that's why I'm saving that one for last. But yeah, for this one, I've got the Badger repeaters on the turrets and on the wings. And then on the nose, we have this little mount that allows you to have sort of unmanned turret size 1s. And yeah, I mean, we could change this. We could change that to a size 3 gimbal. And then we could have an extra size 2 weapon. It really down to preference. I like to go with the size 2s, size 1s even, because the size 1s aren't that bad. You can put Omniskies on here. Not Omniskies. Actually, I think you can put Omniskies, but you can put Sucker Punch distortion cannons on here, and I think they match up with the repeaters. Don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure the Sucker Punch cannons do match up with the repeaters. So you could put 2 Sucker Punches there and you've got a ton of damage. So now that we're gimbaled, now that we're smaller weapons, we obviously have a lot more fire rate, a lot less damage, but because of the fire rate, and obviously the gimbal capability, the potential damage is somewhat higher, because although you're doing less damage, as in raw damage output, the fact that you've got gimbal weapons means you're going to hit a lot more of the time, especially in sort of jousting situations, in passes and circle strafes. I mean, if you're circle strafing with someone, you're almost guaranteed to hit them. You shouldn't really get into a circle strafe when you're fighting other players, but if you find yourself in that situation and you can see as they're sort of passing over you when you're in sort of the jousting situation, you can keep your guns on them. And one of the hidden benefits about the gimbals that a lot of people don't really take into consideration is most ships in the game are weakest on the top and the bottom of the ship, because a lot of ships have a front shield, a back shield and 2 side shields. Some don't even have the side shields, some just have a front and a back. But yeah, generally most ships are vulnerable directly on the top and directly on the bottom of the ship. And with the gimbals like this, if you're passing over someone in a jousting situation and you're gimbaling your weapons down, as they're passing you, you're going to be hitting the top of their ship or the bottom of the ship, depending if you're passing under them or over them. And a lot of the time that just means insta-kill. You can insta-kill people, or you can kill people extremely quickly because they're vulnerable, especially if they're fixed weapons. They might be flying just straight just to try and pass you and do a turnaround, do some sort of maneuver. You're going to get a load of damage onto their raw hull. Their shield isn't going to do anything for them, or it's not going to do as much. Now obviously that's not always the case. Some ships do have shields covering all sides, some ships have sort of dome shields, but in the case of the Vandal, they don't have top shields. So if you're shooting a Vandal on the top, you're going to kill it a lot quicker than if you're shooting it head on, or if you're shooting at the back of it. I believe they don't have side shields either. But moving on to my favourite loadout, and this is the gimbal sniper option. So this is for those that are like myself and you love ballistic weapons. I love ballistic weapons. I know they can be a pain. You have to reload them and all this sort of stuff. You have to pay for the ammo. But in my opinion, paying for the ammo is definitely worth it because they are just beautiful weapons to use. I love the sound of them. So we've got the size 2 tarantulas on the wings, similar to what we had on the turrets in the fixed option. The tarantulas are my favourite. I mean, a lot of people sort of put them down. And then we've also got tarantulas on the turrets because obviously we are going for a gimbaled option, so we can stick with our turrets. And then we've got the long swords on the front. And the reason I've got the long swords is, for one, they are excellent weapons. They're extremely damaging. And two, their pips match up perfectly with the tarantula's pips. So that means all weapons are going to be hitting the same spot. And when you've got gimbal weapons like this, well, you can see they are slightly off. They're a tiny bit off velocity, but they're so close that they practically match up. Unless a ship is flying extremely quick in like a horizontal direction from you, you're going to hit them with all your weapons. Now, the first thing you might notice with this loadout straight away is the overheating. And that is the one downside I have about this loadout. I don't really let it impact my decision on this loadout because the damage capability of this loadout is insane. You will just insta-kill people so fast, but the overheating is definitely an issue for this ship. The weapons do overheat extremely quickly. Now for this clip I started it mid-fight, so they didn't instantly overheat like that. It wasn't like as soon as I started firing they overheat, but they do overheat very quickly. So for this loadout, I would say even though you've got gimbals, even though you've got fairly quick firing weapons, it's better to play it the way I'm playing it now, which is conservatively similar to the sniper ballistic, well, the fixed ballistic option that we had. It is definitely better to be a little conservative with it, at least when they are sort of starting to overheat. Just fire careful shots, precise shots, accurate shots, because it does enough damage to quickly shred through smaller ships. And this is my go-to loadout if I'm fighting fighters. This is my go-to loadout for Vandal Swarm. It's my go-to loadout for the universe, for fighting pirates. For fighting players, they tend to use this loadout as well, though the only downside I have against players is the ballistics, because in the universe you have to actually go and restock your ammo, whereas in the electronic access, in the Vandal Swarm, you get it every 3 waves, so you don't have to worry about ammo in Vandal Swarm. But it can be an issue in the universe, and that's why a lot of people don't like ballistics, but I personally love ballistics. I can't get enough of ballistics, and whenever I can have a ballistic loadout, I go with a ballistic loadout.